It started off like any other evening at Westdale Market. The lights hummed gently overhead, carts rolled lazily along the aisles, and a few shoppers wandered through the store, grabbing last-minute items. But something about tonight felt off. A young man stepped through the sliding glass doors, 17 years old, hoodie up, earbuds in, calm but alert eyes. His name was Kareem. Most people wouldn't notice him, but someone did. From the second-floor security window, Tom spotted him. Tom was the store's head of security, a tall man in his late 40s, with a military-style buzz cut and eyes trained for suspicion. His job was to protect the store, prevent theft, identify threats before they happened. To Tom, Kareem looked like a red flag. He didn't recognize Kareem, even though the teen and his family had been shopping there for years. It didn't matter. The hoodie, the backpack, the olive skin tone. Tom's instincts kicked in. He tapped his earpiece and quietly murmured to the clerk in the control room, "Guy in hoodie, aisle 3. Keep an eye." Meanwhile, Kareem walked casually down the aisle, checking a shopping list on his phone. He wasn't in a rush. He picked up a can of tuna, read the label carefully, then compared it to another brand. His dad liked the spicy one. His mom needed the low-sodium version. He'd done this a dozen times before, just a normal grocery run after school. But today, he felt it, that prickling sensation down his spine, like someone was staring. He glanced up at the corner mirror. Nothing obvious. Still, the feeling didn't go away. Tom's eyes tracked him from camera to camera. He saw the earbuds, the slow movements, the way Kareem glanced around while shopping. "Actin' nervous," Tom muttered. "Might be hiding something." Kareem kept walking, trying to shake the unease. He moved to the dairy section and picked up a carton of eggs, inspecting them for cracks, like his mom had taught him. He placed them gently in the basket and reached for a bottle of milk. He didn't know that Tom had already left the security room and was now on the floor, trailing him from a distance, pretending to be just another employee. Kareem noticed. The man in the black vest now had followed him from aisle to aisle, first at canned goods, then by the milk, now cereal. Every time he turned, there he was. His heart started racing. He tried to ignore it. Just keep moving. Pick the cereal. Avoid the sugar-heavy ones, or Mom would scold him. But he could feel the man getting closer. Then came the moment, a voice behind him. "Hey there, can I help you with anything?" Kareem turned around, startled. The man wasn't smiling. "No, thanks," he replied politely. "I'm just shopping for my mom." The man nodded slowly. "You shop here often?" Kareem hesitated, a bit confused. "Yeah, every week." The man's gaze dropped to his backpack. "What's in the bag?" Kareem blinked. "My school stuff. Mind if I take a quick look?" The air went cold. Other shoppers started to turn. A woman near the deli stopped mid-step. A man looked up from his cart. Kareem suddenly felt exposed, like every eye in the store had turned toward him. He knew how this looked. He knew what they were thinking. And worst of all, he knew why. "Did I do something wrong?" he asked carefully. "Not saying you did," the guard replied. "Just standard procedure." It wasn't, but saying no would only make things worse. His fingers trembling slightly, Kareem slipped the backpack off his shoulder and unzipped it. Books, notebooks, a pencil case, and a small, tightly sealed plastic container. Tom reached in and picked it up. He opened the lid. Inside was a serving of rice and lamb, a simple home-cooked meal, the kind his mom packed him every day for school. But just beneath the food container, tucked between the books, was something else. Tom squinted and leaned in closer. What he saw made his expression shift in an instant. It wasn't what he expected. Tom stared at it, frozen for a second, unsure how to respond. His grip tightened slightly on the container before he gently set it back down into the backpack. He cleared his throat as if trying to reset the moment. Kareem watched him closely. His face was calm, but inside, a storm was building. His breath caught in his chest. He wasn't sure what the man had seen that caused such a reaction, but he could feel the shift in energy. The cold suspicion in the man's voice had softened just slightly, but the damage was done. Tom looked up. Is that a notebook of drawings? Kareem nodded, confused. Yeah, I sketch after school. Just stuff in my head. Tom gave an awkward nod, then zipped the bag without another word. All right, he said. You're good. No apology, no explanation. Just those 2 words. Kareem took his bag back, his hand brushing the strap slowly. He wanted to ask why. Why was he singled out? Why was it okay to invade his privacy? Why didn't anyone stop to question the man who did? But he stayed quiet, because that's what experience had taught him. Tom stepped back, gave him a half-hearted nod, and walked away, like nothing had happened. But something had. Something that clung to Kareem's chest, like a weight he couldn't drop. As Kareem moved toward the checkout lane, he caught the eyes of the woman who had been watching. She looked away quickly, pretending to compare brands of cookies. The teenager with pink headphones, who had peeked out earlier, was now scrolling on her phone. No one said a word. No one asked if he was okay. The cashier barely looked up when he placed his items on the belt. The beep of each product being scanned was like a ticking clock. He paid, took his bag, and walked toward the exit. Outside, the sun had dipped lower, casting long shadows across the parking lot. Kareem stood beside his bike for a moment, trying to shake off the feeling, that heavy, sinking feeling that followed him out of the store and into the evening air. It wasn't the first time something like this had happened, but somehow, this time hit harder, because he had done absolutely everything right. Back inside, Tom returned to the security room. He sat down heavily in the chair and stared at the monitor. His reflection looked back at him faintly in the screen. For a long while, he didn't speak. The sketchbook. That was what had caught him off guard. He'd expected to find something suspicious. A stash of stolen candy, maybe a hidden item from the shelves. Instead, he saw charcoal drawings, pages filled with detail and emotion. One had a sketch of an old man sitting on a porch. Another, a hand reaching toward the sky with birds flying overhead. Another page showed a grocery store aisle with shadows and lighting drawn with precision. It struck him harder than he expected. He tried to brush it off, told himself he was doing his job, that it wasn't personal, but a small part of him, the part that still remembered being young and misjudged once, felt a sting of guilt. He looked at the screen again. Kareem's face flashed back across his memory. Not as a threat, not as a thief, but as a kid, a teenager, an artist. Later that night, Kareem sat at his desk, sketching in the same notebook. This time, he drew a man's eyes, sharp, distrusting, watching. Behind them, a wall of screens. Underneath, in small letters, he wrote one word, watched. Then he flipped the page and drew himself, standing in a store aisle, looking over his shoulder. The pencil in his hand moved with quiet intensity, every line a release of what he couldn't say aloud. Across town, Tom sat in his small apartment, watching a cooking show play on low volume. His dinner sat half-eaten. He kept thinking about the notebook, the kid's face, the silence between them. He reached for the remote, but didn't press play. Instead, he picked up his phone and searched something he hadn't thought about in years: how to recognize unconscious bias. The screen loaded slowly, and for the first time in a long while, Tom didn't look away. The next day came without much fanfare. Kareem woke up, got dressed for school, and tucked the same notebook into his backpack, now filled with a fresh sketch he hadn't shown anyone. The tension from the night before hadn't disappeared. It stayed with him like the ghost of a conversation that never happened. The kind of memory that burns a little deeper because it's quiet and lonely. At school, he walked the same hallways, heard the same greetings, passed the same students. None of them knew. No one asked, and he didn't tell. During art class, Mrs. Grant noticed his drawings were darker than usual. She'd seen his talent bloom over the past year, often amazed by how much he could express through pencil and paper. But today, she hesitated. "Everything all right, Kareem?" she asked gently, crouching next to his desk. He nodded, not looking up. "Just tired." She didn't press. Teachers learn to recognize when a kid doesn't want to talk, but she also knew that artists often say the most when they're silent. Meanwhile, halfway across town, Tom sat in the break room at Westdale Market, sipping a bitter coffee from a paper cup. He kept glancing at the time, unable to focus. His mind replayed the image of that sketchbook, the art, the quiet hurt in the boy's face. The search he had done the night before still lingered in his browser history. Articles about bias, stereotyping, microaggressions. Words he'd never really sat with. Words that now clung to him, like a mirror he wasn't ready to face. He thought about his job, about all the times he'd trusted his gut, all the times he'd followed someone who looked a certain way. He told himself it was protocol, pattern recognition, but the truth didn't feel that clean anymore. Tom got up, walked to the manager's office, and knocked. "Got a minute?" he asked. Janet, the store manager, looked up. "Sure, what's up?" He hesitated, then shut the door behind him. "There was a kid in here yesterday, teenager, Arab. I followed him." Janet blinked. "Okay. I thought he might be shoplifting. He wasn't. I checked his bag." He paused. "I didn't have cause." "Not really." Janet leaned back in her chair. "Tom, we have procedures. You know that." "Yeah," he said. "But this wasn't that." There was a long silence. Finally, she asked, "What are you trying to say?" "I'm saying I was wrong. I judged him because of how he looked. And I think I've done it before. Maybe a lot more than I want to admit." Janet stared at him, unsure what to say. Tom had always been reliable, by the book. She hadn't expected this level of honesty or self-awareness. "All right," she said finally. "What do you want to do about it?" He exhaled. "I want to talk to him, if he ever comes back in." She gave a small nod. "Okay. Just do it right." That afternoon, Kareem got home and unpacked his bag. The sketchbook went on the table, but he didn't open it. He just stared at it for a moment, then walked to the kitchen where his mom was prepping dinner. "Can I help?" he asked. She looked up, smiling. "You? Volunteering for kitchen duty? What happened?" He chuckled softly. "I just want to do something useful." As they chopped vegetables and mixed spices, the rhythm of cooking brought a strange comfort. It reminded him of everything he loved: the warmth, the smell, the safety. His family's world, tucked inside their little apartment, was a place where no one questioned his presence. No one followed him with suspicion. After dinner, he sat on the balcony with his sketchbook. He flipped through the pages slowly, his fingers brushing over each drawing like old memories. Then he tore out one of the newer ones, the one of himself in the grocery aisle, looking over his shoulder. He folded it carefully and slid it into his pocket. The next day, Kareem returned to Westdale Market. He didn't tell his parents. He just felt like he needed to go back. Not for groceries, but for himself. A way to reclaim the space that had made him feel small. As he walked through the aisles, he noticed the same lights, the same shelves. But this time, he wasn't carrying a list, just his sketchbook and that one folded drawing. He didn't expect to see the security guard. But there he was. Tom spotted him near the dairy section again. Kareem hesitated. They made eye contact. A second passed, then another. Tom approached slowly, less rigid than before. "Hey," he said, quieter than last time. Kareem nodded but didn't say anything. Tom cleared his throat. "I owe you an apology." That made Kareem pause. "I shouldn't have stopped you. I didn't have a reason, and I shouldn't have assumed." Kareem's expression didn't change much. He had heard apologies before. Some meant something. Some didn't. "I judged you because of how you looked," Tom continued. "I was wrong. I've been wrong before. I'm trying to be better at seeing it." Kareem slowly reached into his pocket and unfolded the drawing. Without saying a word, he handed it to Tom. Tom took it. He stared at the lines, the shading, the figure in the aisle looking over his shoulder with a mix of fear and quiet strength. He looked up. "You drew this?" Kareem nodded. Tom didn't say anything at first. Then he folded the paper back up, carefully, as if it were fragile. "I'm going to keep this," he said. Kareem didn't smile, but his eyes softened. Just a little. Tom extended a hand. Kareem looked at it for a second, then shook it. Tom watched the boy walk away, the sketch still warm in his hand. He stood there for a while, not moving, as shoppers passed by with carts and small children, tugging at their sleeves. Something in him felt cracked open, not broken, but exposed, like a door that had been shut for too long, finally creaked on its hinges. Back in the security room, Tom taped the drawing beside his monitor. Not as decoration, not as a trophy, but as a reminder. A reminder that not everything is what it seems. That instinct isn't always wisdom. That you can be in charge of safety and still cause harm. Janet stopped by later and raised an eyebrow at the new addition on the wall. "That from the kid?" Tom nodded. "Yeah." She didn't ask more, but her expression softened before she left. Meanwhile, Kareem walked out of the store, the handshake still lingering in his hand, like a strange weight. He didn't know if he felt better, but he didn't feel worse, and that was something. The rest of the week passed slowly. School, homework, dinner, repeat. Nothing dramatic happened. But every time he picked up his pencil to draw, something had shifted. His sketches were more open, not just shadows and tight, coiled expressions, but now scenes of light. A girl smiling through a window, a boy helping an old man cross a street, a security guard, this time seated, not towering, and beside him, a teenager holding a pencil instead of a backpack. In class, Mrs. Grant paused when she saw Kareem's work. She didn't say anything out loud. But later, when she pinned his sketch to the bulletin board, she made sure it was placed right in the center. At the grocery store, Tom found himself noticing things he hadn't before. The way an elderly Vietnamese woman looked nervous when she couldn't read a label. How a black teenager lingered near the exit, clearly waiting for someone, but still got stared at. How a white man in a suit once walked out with an unpaid drink in hand, and no one stopped him. He didn't call them out, not yet. But he noticed, and that was a start. A few weeks later, the store launched a quiet new training module. Janet didn't make a big deal out of it, but she told her staff, especially those in loss prevention, that they'd be attending a workshop on bias, communication, and accountability. Tom sat in the front row. He didn't speak during the sessions, but he listened like he was being told the most important story of his life. Afterwards, he helped rewrite parts of the store's incident protocol. Not everything changed overnight, but some things did. Subtle shifts, new questions, less radio chatter about guy in hoodie, more observation, less assumption. As for Kareem, he kept drawing. One day in early spring, his art teacher handed him an envelope. It was from a local youth arts foundation. Apparently, someone had submitted his sketch, the one with the boy looking over his shoulder in the store. It had been chosen for a city-wide exhibit on youth voices in public spaces. Kareem stared at the letter for a long time, not out of disbelief, but out of something more tender, like he was holding a version of himself that someone had finally seen. He didn't know who had submitted it. Mrs. Grant said it wasn't her. Maybe his parents, though they didn't seem to know. Maybe it was someone else entirely. At the exhibit, his piece hung on a clean white wall, with soft lighting and a small placard that read, "Watched by Kareem H. People." Came and went, pausing in front of it, some reading the title and moving on, others lingering longer. Kareem stood in the back, hands in his pockets, and then he saw him. Tom. He wasn't wearing his security vest, just a dark jacket and jeans. His eyes scanned the room until they landed on the drawing. He stopped, and this time he didn't just look, he saw. After a moment he turned, spotted Kareem near the back, and nodded. Not like before. Not as a gesture of permission or apology, but of respect. Kareem nodded back. No words were exchanged. They weren't needed. Because sometimes healing doesn't come in speeches. It comes in quiet spaces, in drawings on walls, in changed routines, in a man who now waits before assuming, and a boy who no longer sketches from fear, but from truth. Later that night, Kareem walked home under a violet dusk sky, the city humming softly around him. He felt lighter than he had in weeks. He took out his phone and texted a friend, "You know that drawing I told you about?" They hung it in a gallery. His friend replied with rows of fire emojis and, "Dude, what?" He smiled and kept walking. One drawing, one uncomfortable moment, one awkward conversation. Sometimes that's all it takes to start something real. The days turned into weeks, and though the moment had passed, the ripple it created quietly continued. Kareem didn't tell many people about what happened that night in the store, but it began to shape how he saw the world and how he saw himself. He realized that sometimes being seen the wrong way could still be turned into something right. Not because it should happen, but because when it does, you can choose what to do with it. At school, he started offering to help hang other students' artwork in the hall. He volunteered to lead a project for younger kids in the art club, showing them how to draw emotion into their characters, not just faces, but stories behind the eyes. They listened closely. Most of them had never had someone treat their art like it meant something important. One afternoon during a school-wide assembly, the principal called Kareem's name. He blinked, surprised. He hadn't done anything special lately, at least not that he could think of. But as he walked up toward the stage, applause growing around him, the principal announced that his artwork, the piece titled Watched, had been selected to travel with a youth art showcase across the state. Not just for its skill, but for the story it told. He stood there slightly stunned, holding a small certificate and blinking into the lights. Back at Westdale Market, things felt different too. There wasn't a dramatic transformation, but there was a subtle shift. The staff was quieter on the radios. The new hires were trained to look for patterns of behavior, not patterns of skin tone. A young Somali woman had recently been hired as a floor manager, and Janet had started attending community meetings for store owners on inclusion and equity. Tom changed in his own way. It wasn't about speeches or making grand gestures. He still did his job, still watched the cameras, but he also started noticing people more. Not just what they carried, but who they were. He started keeping a sketchbook of his own. He didn't draw much, just stick figures at first, sometimes faces. One time he drew a cart with a broken wheel that kept showing up on camera, but it helped him see differently. One day, a new hire asked him why he had a drawing of a kid in a grocery store on the wall of the security room. Tom looked at the sketch. "That one?" he said. "That's a reminder." "A reminder of what?" the kid asked. Tom smiled faintly. "That doing your job right isn't always the same as doing what's right." The new guy didn't say much, but he looked at the sketch a little longer than expected. Kareem and Tom didn't become friends. They didn't meet up again or exchange more words. They didn't have to. Because the story wasn't about friendship. It was about impact. About the moment when one person's bias collided with another person's dignity, and how both of them chose not to let that be the end. One chose not to let bitterness take root. The other chose not to hide from his mistake. One drew the truth. The other looked at it. And in that strange, unspoken agreement, something rare happened. Not perfection, not justice, but understanding. Years later, when Kareem was asked in a college interview why he started drawing people instead of just places, he smiled thoughtfully and said, "Because places don't follow you. People do." And when he was asked what moment changed the way he saw the world, he thought back to a quiet grocery store aisle, a man with a shaved head, and a conversation that wasn't supposed to happen. "That moment when someone looked in my bag," he said, "and saw more than they expected." He didn't say it with anger. He didn't say it to get sympathy. He said it like an artist tells a story, because that's what he had become. Thanks for watching. If this story moved you, like, comment, and subscribe. For more powerful real-life stories, turn on the notification bell so you never miss what's coming next. See you in the next video.